B is I'm supposed to tell you you're breaking in a new partner in on this.
Partner again?
Yeah, some cat he's on loan from dope. Real burnout, on the ragged edge.
Oh, perfect. Gun!
Raj, meet your new partner.
I'm too old for this shit.
I'm Zach Bennett. I was born in 1981, but somehow I missed out on seeing the greatest movies of the 1980s. So I'm fixing that. I'm going to watch these great films and talk about them with my friends who have loved them for decades. This is Video Oblivious.
Episode 4, 1987's Lethal Weapon. All right, we're talking Lethal Weapon with Sebastian Posey this week. Hey, man, how are you?
How's it going?
Doing well. How about you?
I'm well. I am pumped right now.
That's good to know. Lethal Weapon is a movie that I just saw for the very first time Thursday night, and I'm excited to talk about it because it's not what I thought it was going to be. So, and I see a puzzled look on your face, but...
You like, what did you think it was going to be?
We'll get into that.
Okay.
We'll certainly get into that. But we were just talking off air. All of my guests so far have been people that I've known for years and go back with, including like my wife and my best friend and a guy that I've known. You and I have known each other for literally weeks.
Right.
Just a few weeks.
Right.
And we run in the same circles. We have a lot of the same friends because we're both improvisers.
Indeed.
At a local improv club here in Nashville. So tell me a little bit about yourself because I'm curious because I don't know you that well. Where'd you grow up? How old are you now? What were your influences growing up, siblings and things like that?
So I'm 37.
Okay.
Just turned 37 last month, late last month. I'm from Alabama. I grew up in Birmingham. I went to the University of Alabama in Tuscaloosa, which I know I have a very general accent. I don't really have like a Southern accent, except when I talk about the University of Alabama. It like you can have the most just like pristine vibrato, but as soon as you say like roll tide, it just you sound Southern, and so
yes, you do.
Like you can't not sound Southern when you say it. Like I could just be talking about it's like it's a wonderful day, everything's going great. Oh hello, roll tide. Yeah. But I've
listen. I worked in sports radio in Alabama for almost 5 years. The station in Huntsville that carried Alabama football, and so we had all the super fans would come to every one of our station events or whatever. I know exactly the people you're talking about, and I'm married into a crazy Alabama fan family. So
there's no sane
totally
Alabama
understand.
fan family, and I say this as an Alabama fan. I think like it also, but I will say that the Roll Tide thing, it's like it's almost like, you know how like Howard Stern has the whole Baba Booey.
Yeah,
like Roll Tide can almost always be like no matter what, it just resets things. It's like two people are getting mad at each other, but like if you're both Alabama fans, just one of you goes like Roll Tide. Roll Tide.
And like 15 years ago, ESPN did a great commercial where people just say Roll Tide to each other. And if you've never lived in Alabama, that's exactly what it's like.
It really is.
It really is.
It really is.
They nailed it.
Yeah, it used to always be like if you ever had like a party foul, like if somebody like spilled a drink at somebody's house and everybody's like getting mad at you, all you have to do is either be like Roll Tide. If that doesn't work, you have to be a little bit more showy with it and do the whole like row and like no matter what the people are doing, they're going to join it.
Well, I think we have already lost all of our Tennessee fan friends who listen to the show. So we're among.
I will say this to get them back. I'm on an advisory board for the University of Tennessee.
Okay.
As an Alabama guy, I am on an advisory board helping to shape the youth that are attending the University of Tennessee, which mine does have a great journalism program. So I am proud to support them on that.
Well, I grew up here in Nashville, Mount Juliet actually, and so I grew up a Vanderbilt fan. But as a Vanderbilt fan, there's a natural hatred for Tennessee. And as a Vanderbilt fan, you need to see a team win every now and then.
Right.
So when I was 10 years old was when Alabama, or 11, was when they won the national championship in 92. So all of a sudden I gravitated toward Alabama just because all of my Tennessee friends hated Alabama. And so I've been kind of a Vanderbilt fan first, but the Alabama family has welcomed me in. They're like, that's fine. You can root for us too.
My father-in-law went to Vanderbilt,
Yeah.
and like he I love him to death, and it's been one of the joys of really getting to know him over the last few years. And like my wife and I were a COVID marriage. Like we got married in the backyard in March 2020, but like we ended up having a wedding, so like a party in the next year in 2021. And we did, like, every time any of my like Bama friends got married, we'd always do like a trio of songs, like at every of the weddings. And like one of them was just a song we all did because we had to dance to it, Return of the Mac. We'd always do Sweet Home Alabama, and then we'd always do Dixieland Delight. And then when we did the Dixieland Delight, obviously there's that call and response part. And we obviously say the F, like, and all that. And my mother-in-law, her brother went to Tennessee and apparently was not happy when we got to that part, like turned his chair or whatever. And like my father-in-law was telling me about that the next day, and I was just like, he's like, you're like. I guess my uncle, I don't know how you even refer to it in the in-laws part, but like, he wasn't too happy when you guys did that part. And in my brain, I'm about to be like, I gotta defend myself and all this. And he like leaned in and he whispered, he's like, I loved it. Because he's a Vandy guy. He's a Vandy guy. So like, yeah.
That's fantastic. So did you have any siblings? Is it just you?
I'm an only child.
Me too.
Nice.
Hey.
Yeah. My mother was a little older when she had me. So like, it was more so kind of the, she always said I was a miracle child. I was like, that's just what you say when someone's an accident. But I grew up as an only child, and really kind of just spent I was like a latchkey kid.
Yeah.
So basically like my afternoons were spent like get your homework done and then just throw on whatever's on like TBS, or like when my like stepdad would pick me up from school, like he'd always go, I think in your JD Lind episode, you guys talked about renting videos from Kroger.
Yeah.
Down in Alabama, we used to rent videos from like Rite Aid.
Yep.
That really ages me. And like he kind of is the reason that I started really getting into like, because he'd rent like a lot of action movies and stuff, and like he'd let me watch it as long as I'd finished my homework. And so like that was always kind of my like big afternoon thing.
And that was your introduction to Lethal Weapon.
It definitely was.
All right,
it absolutely was.
Let's talk about it. It was released March 6th, 1987 by Warner Brothers. Was made on a $15 million budget, brought in $65 million domestically, total box office worldwide $120 million, financial success. It opened number one with $6.8 million, and unlike a lot of movies, it had a week-over-week increase from the first week to the second week. So there was a lot of word of mouth. That even in the 80s, that very rarely happens with movies. They'll open big and then they'll drop off. This one opened big and stayed big for another week. It spent 3 weeks in the number one spot, wound up becoming the number 8 movie overall of 1987 in gross. It was Siskel and Ebert gave it 2 thumbs up. The Rotten Tomatoes aggregate is at 80%. So we're talking about one of the most popular movies of 1987 for sure.
Love it.
Richard Donner was the director. He, prior to this, had a pretty good track record.
Yeah. He's kind of good.
He's kind of good. He did Superman. He got kicked off of Superman 2, but he did The Toy and he did The Goonies. And then after Lethal Weapon, he would go on to do Scrooged, Maverick, and all 3 Lethal Weapon sequels, among other things.
Have you seen Maverick, by the way?
I have, but it's been a while.
Wait, so... Oh, this is interesting. So you saw Maverick.
The Mel Gibson
not
Maverick.
The
Top Gun Maverick, but the Mel Gibson Maverick, yes.
So obviously, like, Danny Glover has a cameo in Maverick. And that would have, knowing that you haven't seen Lethal Weapon, that had to have just gone over your head.
I haven't seen Maverick probably since the 90s. So even then, I wouldn't have gotten it. I remember seeing Maverick at the Sumner Drive-In in Gallatin, which is long gone.
So there's a scene in Maverick where one of the, I believe he's like a bank robber, and it turns out to be Danny Glover, and he says the line, "I'm getting too old for this."
Yeah.
Like, it was clearly a wink and a nod to their run together in Lethal Weapon.
Nice. Yeah. Little cameo. No, I don't remember that, but that's one of those that I've seen on Netflix or scrolling through going, I should watch that again, because I remember it being fun.
Yeah.
And, of course, there's the Clint Black song, and I work at a country radio station, which we still play, so every time I hear that Clint Black song, I'm reminded of Maverick, which, of course, starred Mel Gibson, and you mentioned the cameo by Danny Glover. It was fun to watch Lethal Weapon to see a pre-brain damage Gary Busey.
I was literally talking about that with my wife too. It was like
because his accident was maybe a year after Lethal Weapon came out. And,
was it that early? I thought it was in the early 90s.
Wikipedia said 88, but he was in the motorcycle accident and suffered brain damage, and he still acts, obviously, to this day, but he has a different cadence now than he did.
Well, that's interesting because that means he did Point Break after. And like I was talking with my wife about this of like Gary Busey I think is one of the biggest like what ifs in terms of actors because like I think like and we'll talk more about him obviously in Lethal Weapon, but if you look at just some of the stuff he was doing, like he was so good at being like he could be super likable in like in a Point Break. I think he's really likable in the underrated Silver Bullet that came out in the mid 80s, Stephen King's Silver Bullet, where he plays kind of the loser uncle that really helps. I think it's Corey Haim in that movie. But then also like he can play a psycho so well, like in this or in Under Siege. He's really fun in Predator 2.
The accident was in December of 1988.
Wow.
And
wear a helmet, people. Wear a helmet.
That, he did Predator 2 in 90, Point Break was 91, Under Siege 92. Yeah. So he's had a very, very long filmography here following his accident. But to see him before was one thing. So my wife had never seen this movie either. We both watched it for the first time Thursday night. And I just remarked to her, I said, it's very interesting to see Gary Busey and his cadence prior to the accident because it was a much obviously smoother delivery, and he was very, very good as the bad guy in this movie.
Right. Like he's technically the second bad guy, and really he's the more captivating of the two.
Yeah. Well, he's the henchman.
Yeah, he's the muscle.
But he's in the film a lot more.
Oh yeah.
Than Mitchell Ryan.
Well, because that's an 80s thing too. I think a lot of times you'd see these like they'd get villains, they'd get a more older, mature actor to kind of chew the scenery a little bit. But when you had those moments of like when you needed those kind of action sequences, you needed that kind of like henchman type guy to really do that. Because like General Parker's not going to be doing that fist fight at the end of the movie. No, that would have been horrible.
Yeah. And that one, we'll get to that. Yeah. But his name was General Peter McAllister.
Oh, sorry.
Which is fine, because I went, that name sounds familiar. That's the dad's name in Home Alone as well, Peter McAllister. So, which I watched last night, not for the very first time. Just that's an annual Christmas viewing. Speaking of that, I had no idea that Lethal Weapon was a Christmas movie until I hit play and Jingle Bell Rock is the first thing I hear. And I'm thinking, well, my thought process through this was, I've never heard of anyone mention Lethal Weapon as a Christmas movie. I hear Die Hard all the time. Die Hard's a Christmas movie. Die Hard isn't a Christmas movie. I have never heard Lethal Weapon mentioned in that same vein. So I'm thinking, okay, well, maybe it's just this scene takes place at Christmas. Nope, the whole movie takes place. And so I'm thinking, that's interesting. I did not choose this movie because Christmas was coming up. I just thought that's one I would like to do next. And it worked out perfectly because it's our Christmas episode.
It's the miracle of Christmas.
It worked out very, very well.
See, this is proof that we have only known each other for a couple weeks because some people like me have proudly declared this a Christmas movie for years.
Yeah.
Die Hard's obviously like it's a go-to for me. But like this is number 2, like in terms of like action Christmas movies. Mm-hmm. Like I watch both of those every year. It's a fun, like I love the Home Alones. I love Muppet Christmas Carol. I love all that stuff. Mm-hmm. But like I always love, like I got to make sure I watch Die Hard. I watch that Christmas Day every year. Like Die Hard 2 is always something I watch around Christmas time. Lethal Weapon's always something I watch around Christmas time. A fun fact about it. Well, one, like technically it's Christmas because like your director's last name is Donner. It is a reindeer. But Joel Silver, who produced it, and I'm gonna like I can't remember the source of it, but he did an interview years ago, and I remember hearing this on like a different podcast many moons back. This action podcast called Action Boys. But apparently Joel Silver used to love if you look at Joel Silver's kind of filmography. He loves putting movies around Christmas, and like a lot of it is just because they're visually striking. Like it's this motif of like this action piece set to like very colorful, very bright, very warm tones, and like it really stands out like in the scene where they're reading about the daughter getting kidnapped, and you have that like super bright red just like illuminating their faces. Like there's such a really warm tone, warm vibrance to like what is a very harsh kind of like subject matter, and that was like a lot of reasons why you'd see these kind of movies being set at Christmas.
Interesting. And then, yeah, the visuals too of a fight scene or an action sequence with Christmas lights in the background, Christmas trees in the window.
The colorful ones too, like those classic 80s like big bulb strings.
Yeah.
Love it.
Yeah. But I had no idea that it was a Christmas movie. And so it kind of blew my mind. And so like I said, I was just thinking, why have I never heard that before? And I don't know. I have no answer for that, because I see all the Die Hard memes, and I didn't see Die Hard until maybe 6 or 7 years ago. I'm behind. I'm so far behind, Sebastian. So far behind. But yeah, never heard Lethal Weapon in the same vein. So
Came out even before Die Hard.
it did. But what's interesting, it came out in March.
Yeah.
So
Well, Die Hard was July.
I wonder why it was delayed, or was it supposed to come out at Christmas season of '86 and pushed back? I couldn't find any information on that.
I really think it's just like the like Silver, and I think Shane Black, who wrote this, he wrote a lot of stuff around Christmas too. Like even like in the 2016 movie, Mr. Nice Guys, or The Nice Guys, whatever it's called, the Russell Crowe movie.
Crowe and Ryan Gosling.
Have you seen it?
Yes, I have.
What time of year is it set?
Set in Christmas.
Yep, came out in summer.
It did.
Like it's Iron Man 3 was a Shane Black movie. What time of year is it?
Christmas. Now that you mention it.
Yeah. There's something about setting these movies at Christmas, regardless of if they come out at Christmas. There's something about setting them in this time where you can really dress up sets, or really like, it's almost like in an improv scene where you need that one little extra thing.
Yeah.
You may not always reference it, but you know it's there.
Yeah. No, it makes sense now that you mention it, because if I'm in a movie theater in July, the movie starts and I'm transported into the time and place of the movie.
Right.
So suddenly it is Christmas time in your mind, and then you walk out and it's 97 degrees.
In the words of Hans Gruber, cheer up, Theo. It's Christmas.
Yes. So the recap, the plot. If of course I'm the only person that had never seen this movie, but everybody else has.
I will tell you this before you recap the plot. This
Yeah.
is the most fascinating part of this podcast to me.
Yeah.
Because I love this movie, but for the longest time, I could watch it every year.
Yeah.
And then about like a month later, if you ask me what the plot of Lethal Weapon is, I don't know. It's one of these things where it's like, wait, what are they doing most of the movie?
The plots, the summary I have is very, very short. It's just two newly paired cops. They're total opposites. They got to come together to solve this drug ring and to take out this drug ring. That's pretty much the whole movie.
Yeah.
But it's one of these movies that you look at the cast and it's not two people, Riggs and Murtaugh. It's not, this person was also considered for the role and this person was also considered. It was written to be a star-driven movie, and Mel Gibson and Danny Glover were the two people they had in mind.
Do you know the movie that Mel Gibson turned down for this movie?
I read it, but go ahead.
The Fly.
The Fly, yes. Yeah. Interesting. They said they had to, pardon the pun, they had to fly him in from Australia to do the table read with Danny just to see if their chemistry worked out, and it turned out it did. It worked out very, very well.
This movie doesn't work if they don't have chemistry.
And Danny Glover, the movie starts off. I did find it interesting. The first three people we see in the movie are totally naked. We've got the girl who dives off the building. Then the next scene is Danny Glover in the bathtub, and the next scene is Mel Gibson waking up naked in his camper.
Oh yeah,
So the first three scenes of the movie, we have nudity in some form or fashion. I did find it funny that Murtaugh's in the bathtub and his whole family just barges into the bathroom.
My first note that I wrote is who takes morning baths. And like the fact that like not only is he taking a morning bath, but his kids come in with you couldn't wait till he was at the breakfast table. Your father's naked. These children are teens. Like, no, don't do this.
And he turns 50, and Danny Glover was 40 when the movie was made. And Mel Gibson was 30, and I assume Riggs was probably around that age. It's never specifically said.
No, and Murtaugh keeps calling him kid, and like it's like there's no way he's a kid. Like
No.
he's definitely he has to be around 30.
Yeah.
But I guess like since Murtaugh's supposed to be 50, I guess I can kind of see that.
He's getting too old for this shit, which is the
Are we allowed to curse on this?
sure.
Sweet.
I can put the E. It's a podcast.
That's
I
true.
can say this episode is explicit.
It's true because there is one of my favorite lines of the movie.
We're
is a
talking
curse.
an R-rated action movie. Of course we
That's
can.
true.
Yeah.
One of my favorite lines, like, because I like one of my favorite quotes in the movie. I guess I could just go ahead and say it, but like when like Mr. Joshua is going through the house and like he's trying to find Murtaugh, like there's the old Christmas carols playing on the screen,
Yes.
and it's like what day is it? What day is it? And he just like looks and just takes his gun. It's like it's goddamn Christmas. It's just like. It's just such a like he's so angry, and it's like
Yes.
just to drop that line. I was like, I love Gary Busey so much in this.
Yes, that made us laugh out loud. It's in such a heavy action scene to have that one laugh line.
Yeah.
It's so perfect to break it up. There's a lot of that in this movie. The scene where Riggs is talking the jumper off the roof. And
You're crazy, man.
There are a lot of laugh lines in that scene. And when he dove off the roof, I didn't really fully expect that to happen because I think in the scheme of the movie, it was probably too quick to get that bag inflated for them to jump in on. But because I'm thinking, where are they going to land? Because this is the second time in the movie we've seen someone jump off of a building. And in the first one, she lands on a car and dies.
Yes.
And so I'm thinking, where are they going to land? And then they land in this giant inflatable crash pad.
Which he should have, like, I know we don't see it.
Yeah.
But that's one of the notes I took too of like this guy who's now worried about being thrown off with Riggs. Does he not see that below them?
Exactly.
Like that crash pad's huge.
You would think that the generator blowing the air in there would be loud
Yeah.
to the point where they wouldn't be able to hear. It's movie magic. I
Right,
get it.
right.
But
It's Christmas magic.
it is Christmas movie magic for sure. There's so many things to talk about in this movie. And I really enjoyed it. But what I was going to say, I said earlier, was it wasn't what I expected. I honestly did not know it was that action heavy.
Oh yeah.
I thought it was more like a buddy cop movie because apparently the sequels are. They're more buddy cop movies than this one was. Like, tell me a little bit about the sequels because I'm gonna watch them now. I really enjoyed this. I heard fell in love with the characters. I want to watch the sequels, but tell me what they're.
I will go ahead and warn you: the sequels diminish, like as they go. But like 2 is incredible.
Yeah.
I think 2. I a lot of times when I was younger, I would conflate certain scenes in 2 with 1. Like there's a whole bit about the main kind of buddy cop thing that really picks up with the sequels is they bring in Joe Pesci.
Mm-hmm.
Like Joe Pesci ends up becoming a mainstay in the series going forward. He's introduced in 2 as, I believe, an informant that they're trying to protect. They're trying to help like protect him, and he just ends up sticking around the rest of the series. But now you have that Joe Pesci like funny Joe Pesci like energy coming into it that really adds to them. There's an incredible set piece in the second one where like somebody puts a bomb on Murtaugh's toilet, and like he doesn't find out till he's sitting on it. It's like that's probably one of the most iconic scenes in the entire series. It has the bad guy is the Hans from Mighty Ducks, which is incredible, and he has one of the most iconic I don't want to spoil the retour of this, but he has a great line throughout the movie saying like he's like you can't touch him because he has diplomatic immunity, and like that's just the whole like 2 is great. I cannot for the life of me tell you the plot of 3. I've seen it a handful of times.
Yeah.
It has something to do with the construction company. 4 was a big swing, and there's certain things. 4 is the only one I saw in theaters. I was a kid, and I was excited to go see it. So I appreciate it for that. It has Jet Li in it. It has, interestingly enough, an actor that I will reference later is in it playing a different character. Chris Rock's in it.
Interesting.
The original plot for it, I think, would have been better. It was supposed to be more about like neo-Nazis, and they kind of they killed that for this like counterfeiting thing instead with this like Asian mafia. But no, the 2 I think you're gonna really like. 3 and 4 is give and take.
Well, 2 was a 1989 movie, so I can just add that to the list, and you and I can do that one further down.
I am down. Absolutely.
Right. Yeah, Lethal Weapon, if you go back through the Rotten Tomatoes ratings, 2 actually got a higher rating than 1. Lethal Weapon was 80%. Lethal Weapon 2, 82%. 3 was 58%. 4 was 52%. So it went down, down, down. And now they've made... Did they remake the movie, or is this a TV show?
They made a TV show.
Damon Wayans and Sean William Scott, and they're playing the same characters?
They made a TV show. Damon Wayans is playing Murtaugh. Sean William Scott is playing... He's not playing Riggs. I think he's playing a relative of Riggs, because the original actor that got cast for Riggs, who played Riggs for like 2 seasons, apparently was not easy to work with. And like, there was a whole separation thing on the show. And rather than recast him, they introduced, I think, like Riggs's cousin or something.
I did totally miss that. I didn't know that was even a thing. Was it on network?
It was on Fox, because when I was working at the Fox affiliate in Birmingham at the time, it was on us.
Wow, 2016 to 2019. I just completely whiffed on that, and maybe because I hadn't seen the movie, I just didn't care. But the thing. I love it when movies say the title of the movie in the movie.
Yes.
And I'm so glad that they did.
One of my notes.
Okay. I'm so glad that he says, "Oh, you're like a Lethal Weapon."
Yeah.
Because I probably never would have made the connection that the title references the character.
Yeah. Riggs is the Lethal Weapon.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
Anytime that line comes on in this movie, like anytime I watch it and it's like they're getting to the parking deck and he's doing all that stuff, I was like, he's saying it. He's about to say it. He's about to say it. Oh, he said it.
It's like, I just think of like a cutaway with Peter Griffin.
The Family Guy thing.
Going, oh, he said the thing. He said the thing. That's the name of the movie.
A Quest for Peace.
I love it. I love it so much. So what made you mentioned your stepdad kind of got you into action movies. Mm-hmm. What made you fall in love with this one specifically?
It's I think like it's just one of those ones where like it just stuck. Like anytime there was one that like I could immediately find a sequel of, I think sometimes helped, because like you get really associated with the characters. For this one, it's almost like I feel like this one for me was an introduction to what are a lot of tropes, whether they created them or whether they are just existing ones, like the whole idea of odd couple pairing, these two cops that have to like get along and do this, and like I really liked. I was a big fan of Mel Gibson as a kid. Mm-hmm. Hopefully, nothing has turned out bad about him. I stopped paying attention to him in like 2004. I'm sure he's fine.
He's totally fine.
He's fine.
Yeah, no controversy.
No. But like something about it just always, his character I just loved. I thought it was like, and as a kid I liked it more because like I didn't really, mental health wasn't really on my radar as a child. So like when I was watching it, like him doing the whole like the Three Stooges stuff and all that stuff, I was like, oh, that's fun. It's like then you get older, you're like, oh, he's going through some stuff. He's going through some stuff. But like I also like vividly remember the score of this movie, and it may be the best use of a saxophone in a score I've ever heard.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I have a question about that. It said in the credits that Eric Clapton was involved in the scoring of the film. I was expecting an Eric Clapton song. I don't think we heard his voice.
No.
So it's all score, right? There's no
all score.
Popular music in this movie, or maybe some here and there, but it's not like there's a montage scene with a song that
there's Jingle Bell Rocks, and I.
Oh yeah.
But I think it's like it's one of the like. Because that was like Murtaugh's, like the sax was always like used for him. I think Riggs has a slightly different one, but if you listen to the movie as it goes, they slowly, like as they're getting closer, as they're bonding, the scores slowly start blending.
Interesting.
Yeah, and it's
Murtaugh's was like more of a slow electric guitar, right?
Yeah. Or like Riggs, I think was guitar. Murtaugh was the just kind of bluesy.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's what Audrey had pointed out when because that's what I was going to ask, was she said something of like, it just, you hear that and you just think cop movie.
Right. Yeah.
And she wanted to know, and I didn't have an answer. Was that kind of where that originated, since they made such a big deal about this is who did the music for this movie? Was that a trope prior to Lethal Weapon, with that kind of gritty, dark, slow saxophone?
I think it probably, in a way, like maybe more of some of the 70s kind of stuff.
Yeah,
but
that's
I think
what I was
like
thinking, but I didn't know.
It didn't have there's a flash and pizzazz to this one that like has just always stuck out to me, of like there's such a polish on like the characters in this and how they treat them, and how like, you know, I find it interesting like you doing this where you're watching it for the first time, because this to me is like one of those movies where like you probably have seen so many movies since that have kind of like mimic the pattern
Yeah.
that it almost sometimes like makes the original not feel as special because you've seen the imitators.
Yeah.
And
sure.
like to me, like this movie just it set like it created a formula that so many people have tried to do since, and it's so hard to match the magic of that.
Yeah. I did not, but yeah, I didn't expect this to be as much of an action film as it wound up being. I thought it was going to be funnier, and there were a lot of funny moments in it, really a lot. And there were times I caught myself laughing out loud, but like you said, the Gary Busey scene with the Christmas where he shoots the television. It's a Wonderful Life was on, wasn't it?
No, it's Christmas Carol.
Christmas Carol. Okay, it was
Yeah.
one of those old black and white
Yeah.
movies. Yeah. It was just so great. But I was thinking it was going to be funnier, and I enjoyed it immensely. When it was over, we looked at each other and we're like, that was really good. Like, why haven't we seen it? And Audrey was talking to her mom on the phone yesterday and mentioned that she had just seen Lethal Weapon for the first time. And her mother said, why haven't you seen that movie before? And she said, I was 4 when it came out. And she said, the first 3 people you see in the movie are naked. I don't think it was appropriate. And her mom said, yeah, we probably kept you away from that one.
Yeah.
But I didn't, I didn't gravitate to this one, obviously. But it's always been one on the list that I've been like, I need to see that. I need to see that movie. I'm glad I finally did.
It's one of those ones like when I saw your list, like there was 2 that immediately stuck out to me.
Yeah.
And this being one of them, because it's just like the idea of knowing somebody hasn't seen this movie, and like obviously everyone's like people's taste can be different, and how like art is subjective. There's probably tons of people that don't like this, but like if somebody likes just like that traditional, that classic kind of like 80s action kind of movie, like this movie is it's a fastball right. You're a Braves fan.
Yeah.
It's a fastball right down the middle that like some guy's just going to knock that thing right out of the park.
And it's never been my favorite genre is action. I'm more of a comedy guy. I enjoy comedies, which is interesting. I haven't done a pure comedy yet on this podcast, partly because I've seen a lot of those. But I this was one that I just had always had in the back of my mind. Oh, that's a comedy that I've never seen. And when it wound up being a straight up action flick with 2 fairly complex characters, I was thrown off by it a little bit about halfway through. I really loved the scene where he is at the very beginning. I think it's when we are not when we're introduced to Riggs, because we get him in his camper, but when he's at the Christmas tree lot with the drug dealers counting out the $100 bills. I'm thinking at this part, okay, I think he's running a bust here. I don't think he's actually buying the drugs. But by that point, we've just seen him stick a gun down his throat. Mm-hmm. And so if you're not aware of the fact, I guess, that he's a cop, which I guess if you come into the movie, you know he's a cop. I wonder if that fooled anybody into thinking he was actually there conducting a drug deal and was too stupid to know that it was not $100 for all this cocaine.
I love him counting out those 20s and like when the one guy is like trying to like, hey, he's like, hey, I'm going to lose count. Like,
it's funny.
It's so funny. Like that's an incredible little like that's so cheeky. And then you realize like it's funny. And then all of a sudden you realize how serious it is, because within 2 minutes of that, like 3 people die. Like there's that shootout that essentially like gets people killed. And like he's being held like it's an interesting thing in like a movie like this in the 80s to tackle what is essentially a mental health crisis. The guy is going through like his wife died. If this movie came out in 87, I think it takes place in Christmas 86. So that means his wife's been dead for 2 years. And like that means for 2 years he has been in a very, very bad place.
Because we see her tombstone, right? And it says 84. Right.
And so like the idea that this guy has just been like it's interesting, by the way, by the end of the series, like, because he's remarried by the end of the series, and like Riggs and they play up to the fact that like Riggs kind of just becomes a normal guy by the end of the series. But this Riggs, to me, he's so fascinating, and like the idea that this guy, like, nobody wants to work with him because they think he's trying to draw like the quote psycho pension, as they keep referring to it. But like that's a fascinating character to stick in a movie like this where like, yeah, Murtaugh's going through so much because he feels he's getting so old. Riggs isn't mentally stable enough for this, and yet somehow they both like can work together on this. I do also hate the fact that the daughter has a crush on Riggs. Thankfully, that thing gets killed the rest of the series.
That was kind of creepy.
I do like that he acknowledges it to Murtaugh in kind of a funny way of like, okay, this is kind of one of those like, you know, it's my dad's partner, like maybe like kind of a schoolgirl crush thing. But it's like there's certain movies that I was like, you'd never know. So thankfully that didn't go anywhere.
She gets kidnapped, and she's a central figure in the plot of the film. But you're right; it's never brought up again. I wonder what the interest was in even having that in there, except to like wink, wink, nod, nod to the audience. We know Mel Gibson's a good-looking guy.
Yeah,
maybe he's too good-looking for this role. Maybe that's what it was for, but it was a little creepy. Yeah.
And it's funny to me, like the like, you know, the first scene you see him when he's like naked in the airline or Airstream trailer, which I find funny because like his lifestyle now, like that guy would be like that spot on the beach. He could make a killing with an Airbnb right there. But like this guy like gets up, he's still ripped, but like all he does is smoke cigarettes and drink beer. It's like, come on, like he wouldn't look like that, like on that diet.
Exactly. He wakes up with a lit cigarette in his mouth.
Lit cigarette in his mouth, door wide open.
Yes. How long has he been passed out at that moment? Probably not very long.
Hopefully not.
If the cigarette is hanging out of his mouth. And one other thing I noticed, and it's just because I pay attention to background stuff, every scene where there's a television on, Family Feud is on. It's on at all times of the day, apparently, in Los Angeles in 1986. And I made the joke to my wife. I said, they didn't even have Pluto TV back then where you could have Family Feud on 24 hours a day. I just found that funny, just a random aside.
This is a movie where like, and in your other episodes you talked about if you go back and rewatch it. My hope is that this is one you will want to rewatch.
Yeah,
but like,
I will.
There are certain things you pick up on as like in future viewings, and one of my favorites is if you listen to the scanner when Murtaugh's pulling up to the hotel. Did you hear what they said on the scanner?
No.
So they are describing a suspect. A drunk is like they're calling for units to show up to this place. A drunk white female, approximately 5 feet tall, 350 pounds, 3 Clubs bar, whatever the name of the street, drunk, nude, and singing. That apparently is happening somewhere down the street. A 5 foot, 350 pound naked woman singing. Drunk at a bar.
Los Angeles. Although I've been to Los Angeles many times, I don't think I've ever seen a 350-pound person out there. Everybody's in remarkably good shape.
Let alone a 5 foot one.
Exactly. With In-N-Out burgers on every corner. I don't understand, but I've never seen someone who is my size for sure out in Los Angeles. Okay, so take away the fact that you just watched this movie. I ask this of every guest. What is the first thing you think of? If I say Lethal Weapon, what's the first thing that pops into your mind?
I do think the score is very high up there. But I think Riggs is just such a, like, I just think of like Mel Gibson and how much I love that character, and not everything about it has aged well. But just in general, like it's the hair, it's like the way he like carries himself throughout the film. He's like such an interesting, like, it's so hard not to pay attention to him. I'm
glad you said the hair, because early in the movie, especially when he wakes up, his hair is very unkempt.
Yeah.
It's very wild. And then we talk about the character growth, and you said, he becomes like more of a normal guy toward the end of the series. He really kind of hints at that at the end of the first movie,
right,
when they're walking back into Murtaugh's house for the Christmas dinner. And I forget what the line was, but he's like, "You're not as crazy as I thought you were," or something. And if you notice there, he's very buttoned down. Like his hair is nice and well maintained, well groomed, or whatever.
He also says he kind of likes Murtaugh's wife's cooking, and Murtaugh's like, no, you don't. Like that.
Okay, that's a funny trope throughout the movie.
I have that like trope. Wife can't cook. Like such an '80s trope of like, it's like, oh, my wife's cooking. Like, but they show her like she drops the egg in the middle of the kitchen. It's just like, why are you so mean to this woman? Like,
he says something about I'm thin. Yeah. And then Riggs says, well, with your wife's cooking, I understand why. Or something like that. Oh, that was a funny gag that just, every time it would come up, another one of those laugh lines that it really just eases that tension because it is such a strong action film. Really, really enjoyed that. And I didn't realize Darlene Love is cast as his wife.
Yes.
I remember Darlene Love primarily from David Letterman's Christmas episode every year. Do you know about this?
I have heard vaguely of it only because I know her so well from this.
Yeah. So it was an annual tradition. My dad introduced me to David Letterman when I was a kid. He would tape it at 11:30 at night, and we'd watch it at dinner the next day. So I watched David Letterman a lot as I was a kid. I was fortunate to get to actually go to the Late Show in his last year in New York, which was pretty awesome. But every year for several Christmases, he would bring on Jay Thomas, who was a morning DJ and also an actor. He was in several things. He was on Cheers for a couple of years. And he would retell the story of him meeting the Lone Ranger at a radio remote where they were all high. And every year he would tell this story. And then there was one year that Letterman put a meatball on top of the Christmas tree to top the Christmas tree. And Vinny Testaverde was his guest, and he had Vinny Testaverde throw the football to try to knock the meatball off the top of the tree with a football. Well, Vinny Testaverde missed like 3 passes in a row.
Sounds like
Jay Thomas nailed it on
yeah.
his first one. So it became a Christmas tradition where every year he would bring on Jay Thomas to tell the Lone Ranger story and throw a football at the tree to knock the... And then Darlene Love would come out and sing the same Christmas song every year. And it just kind of became a tradition in our house. Oh, it's Letterman's Christmas episode. And so that's where I know Darlene Love from. So when I saw her in the film, I was like, she looks familiar. And then I went back and looked at the cast and went, oh, now I'm piecing everything together. So, I mean, she had done some acting.
Yeah,
she was primarily known as a singer.
Yeah, and because I remember, like, I'm always a big IMDb person. Like when I go through things, and like I remember one of the first times I was doing that with this one, I was like, I feel like I know her from something else, but I really truly feel like this is the only thing I know her from. But like, it's stuck with me so long. I do have some other casting things for you. If you
Let's
want to
go
start with casting.
Let's talk about the cast.
So obviously, like, to me, like, I have Die Hard and this are my two like action Christmas movies.
Yeah.
There are 3 actors in this that are in both.
Okay.
Mary Ellen Trainor, who is the news anchor in Die Hard, is the psychologist for this, like, for the police precinct or whatever. Mind you, probably
is she
not
the one that follows him into the men's room.
Yes.
Okay.
Who is giving way too much of Riggs's like diagnosis to anyone who'll listen, including Murtaugh on that strange giant cell phone.
Yeah.
When the camera pans away and Riggs is just sitting right there. Like, it's like if he really was paying attention, he could hear that conversation.
Yes, absolutely.
There's also Grand L. Bush, who in this movie plays Boyetta, who's like the cop that introduces Murdoch to his new partner, Riggs. Mm-hmm. He played Little Johnson in Die Hard, one of the 2 like FBI guys that gets blown up.
Yes.
And then the most famous one is Al Leong. Al Leong, who is just one of those guys. There's a documentary about him too, about like literally he's an Asian actor who got cast so often as like a henchman thing. Like, so in this, he's Endo. He's the guy who does the...
Right.
Yeah. He's also Yuli in Die Hard, the one that does the crunch bar or whatever.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's him.
Interesting. And these movies came out 9 months apart?
Yeah.
Die Hard was Christmas 87.
It came out in July of 87.
Oh, so 3 months apart.
Yeah.
3 or 4 months apart.
Yeah.
And somewhat similar movies.
Or July 88, July 88, because it was about Christmas 87.
Okay.
Came out July 88.
Okay, so a year apart.
Yeah.
But they're somewhat similar movies.
Yeah, that's why I love watching them.
Crazy
both.
Cop.
Yeah.
Have you ever seen the Netflix special with Rob Lowe where he goes through the movie tropes? I forget what it is. Came out a couple of years ago. This was during the pandemic, and it was just Rob Lowe introducing a movie trope and then showing a whole bunch of clips about that movie trope. And one of them, toward the beginning, was the crazy cop.
Yeah. And
that was where I was introduced to that scene with Riggs at the Christmas tree lot saying, "That's a real badge. This is a real gun." Or "I'm a real cop. That's a real badge. This is a real fucking gun."
Yeah.
You know, and when I saw that in the film, I went, "Where have I seen that before?" And so that Rob Lowe, that was great, by the way. That show? I would recommend that. It's a little clunky because it is.
That's not the Movies We Love one, is it?
No, it's not the. I forget what it's called, but it's. I would recommend that to you and anyone listening. It's just a fun way to kill an hour and a lot of reminiscing about movies, and then you look at things and you're like, yeah, and you start watching movies a different way because you'll start noticing the tropes maybe a little bit more. They do a whole series about grocery bags that have a baguette sticking out of it.
Yeah, that's such a
in every movie,
no matter where they are, no matter what, there's always a baguette. It's fun kind of picking up on, like, not to get away from Lethal Weapon for a second, but to kind of stick on the Die Hard part. Another Joel Silver one. I think it's Joel Silver. I think it's either him or Steve. I'm blanking on his name. But basically, like, have you seen Predator? Is Predator on your list?
It's on the list. I haven't seen it.
Oh my goodness, man!
I'm behind.
See,
I didn't watch any movies in the 80s except.
I think when I was looking at your list, I got there like this and RoboCop, and I was just like, I can't keep looking at it because any action one, I'm gonna be like, I gotta do that one. I gotta do that because 80s action is like my thing. Love it to death. And like, but like Predator takes place in a place called like Valverde, a fake country that like. I want to say it's a Joel Silver thing. I feel, or somebody involved in it. I hate to like misquote it on who it is, but basically, all of that, like that country was also referenced in Die Hard. It's a fake country. It's referenced in Die Hard. It's also referenced in Commando, because like there's like rebels that they're trying to like release in Die Hard from Valverde. It's where somebody's from in Commando, meaning technically. Those three movies exist in the same universe, meaning Die Hard exists in a world where predators live. And like I wish that would have had somehow played into Lethal Weapon. Although on Die Hard 2, there is an ad for Lethal Weapon on the back of a magazine that the woman next to his wife is reading on the plane.
And I noticed I love seeing movies where there's a movie marquee in the background.
Yeah. Lost Boys. I have that, yeah.
Lost Boys was
this year's biggest hit.
Yes.
The Lost Boys.
And speaking of movie connections, and I had to pause the film and Google this. So Hunsaker says he was part of a group called Air America.
Yes.
A CIA operative airline. 3 years later, Mel Gibson stars in a movie called Air America about a covert CIA airline thing. Do you know anything, like, what was that in any way related, or was it just a weird?
I think it might just be a coincidence, because I think Air America is also just one of those like it's a very easy word like for like to work in terms of what they were.
But apparently that was a real thing.
Yeah,
Air America was a real CIA operative airline.
And that's why I think it's a recognizable one then. And like, so it makes sense to say something, because like you're trying to gotta really get a picture of this Hunsaker guy who apparently, like, his daughter was born in Tennessee. They say that.
Yeah.
I would not trust him, not because just the drug thing, but like I wrote this down. I don't like how he holds cartons. Like and I'm sure they did this because like it's the visual of him getting shot and it going through the carton.
Yeah. But
he holds it like this, like when he's talking to Murtaugh and he's just like, he's holding the, like this is a podcast, chest. So this is a visual joke, so this does not help. But he's like holding it in such a way that's like, what are you doing? Like, are you on heroin? He had this weird, gentle, like, I don't want it's so fragile. It's a carton of eggnog. Some of the other like little things I've like, there's a guy in it, is the 80s action guy in me. There's an actor in it named Sven Ole Thorsen.
Yeah.
He's one of the mercenaries. That guy is like Arnold Schwarzenegger's like buddy and like workout friend. So much so that like he put him in so many movies, but he ended up getting cast. Like I guarantee if you saw his face, you'd be like, I've seen that guy in he never has speaking lines.
Yeah.
but he is always in these movies as like a mercenary or like a background like muscle. And it's like, it's so hard not to notice him when like I have a minor obsession with things like Arnold and like Sly Stallone and all that. And so like anything I've seen and he pops up, I'm like, oh, hey, it's Sven. It's Arnold's buddy.
But it's funny you mentioned Arnold Schwarzenegger because Terminator is going to be the next episode that comes after this one. I've already recorded it, and it was going to come out the day this one comes out. But when I found out that Lethal Weapon was a Christmas movie, I said, well, I got to do them out of order now. I've got to do Lethal Weapon first because it is a Christmas movie, and it's going to come out here the week before Christmas. I'm still blown away by that. How I missed that?
I'm shocked by that.
As long as I did.
But again, I mean, like the movies you have not seen,
it's stupid how many.
I just think it's funny that when you I thought that's why you reached out to me about Lethal Weapon now. It's like, oh, this is going to be your kind of Christmas episode.
No, I was just looking at it, and honestly, the reason I reached out about Lethal Weapon is because I thought it was a comedy. And I thought, oh, it's time to do a comedy. Because I'd done Never Ending Story, which was a very fantasy movie, and then Dirty Dancing, which was kind of a chick flick, and Karate Kid, which is kind of a teen movie. I thought, hey, it's time for a comedy. Lethal Weapon, that's a good one. Nope, I was wrong. So, and then I did Terminator because I was like, oh, I want to do an action movie. And then I find out Terminator's really more of a sci-fi.
Yeah.
So
it's more of a sci-fi, almost horror than action.
Yeah. So, especially with the tropes that they use. So that's why it's called Video Oblivious, because I am oblivious to all these great movies that so many people have seen and known and loved for so many years. And then here I am, just like, well, I'm finally watching them 40 years after the fact.
I do think like, and it's fun with how they kind of work in some additional like kind of Christmas stuff with it, of like when the general gets killed and like has all that heroin, like it blows up the car and it creates snow. It's essentially snowing heroin in downtown LA. And it's like a really fun visual until you realize like there's all these people standing there. The cops are not telling them to leave. They're just getting high. Like it's just raining heroin like in downtown LA.
So great. Do you think the movie's aged well?
I mean, for the most part, I think there's certain things about it. Obviously, Mel Gibson, I'm assuming some bad things have happened since 2004 with him.
A couple.
Yeah.
Well, take that away. I just mean, the question I like to ask is, if this movie was put into a can in 1984 and forgotten about, the joke I made on the Terminator episode, which you'll hear next week, is if David Zaslav had gotten his hands on this movie and said, nah, we're just not going to release it after it was already finished. And then it was found 35 years later. Here we are, 36 years later. What would we think about discovering this movie for the first time?
I think for the most part it has. I do think some things like there's a line like when Dixie's house blows up and like
let's talk about that. Go ahead.
When Murtaugh is covering Riggs and Riggs says a line that's like, what are you? And I don't want to say that F word, but like,
yeah,
you know, it's like a little bit of like a homophobia kind of bit like that doesn't age well. I think some of the like the way they talk about some of like, you know, the sex workers, I don't think has really aged well. But like, again, it's the 80s and it's one of those things where like enough of it I think is fine to like where you can kind of be like, it's not like the whole movie gets ruined because there are certain 80s movies that I feel like they're hard to watch now because like I don't know if this is 80s or very, very late 70s movies. But like Animal House.
Yeah. It's hard to watch.
It's so hard to watch.
Ace Ventura is impossible to watch now.
Yeah, like these movies, like there are going to be certain things that don't age well.
Yeah.
But like overall, I do think like because it's become such a template for these kind of movies that I do think like a lot of it has, and I think you have to get rid of some of the lines of dialogue. Like I think Riggs says something fairly offensive toward Endo about his nationality when he's like electrocuting him. But like those are things where like you could technically take those out and the movie still works perfectly fine.
Yeah, because that's not central to the relationship between the two characters, which is really, you mentioned at the very beginning, you probably couldn't tell you what this plot is about 30 minutes after you watch it. The plot of the movie really is the relationship between Riggs and Murtaugh. That's the whole movie, and how they help each other grow. And Riggs kind of helps Murtaugh loosen up a little bit, and Murtaugh kind of brings Riggs a little more toward
closure. I think closure.
Sanity, but
I think it's closure because like he's moving on. Like he has not let the death of his wife rest yet, and like because it's not like a thing where it's like she was murdered and he's trying to find her killer. Like it's he hasn't been able to start moving on, and I think that Murtaugh allows him to do that. Like he's helping him find like a center, and like that's why I like 2 as well, because like you get a little bit more. Like it's not like a lot of times with sequels they do that thing where it's like a lot of the same thing just again. They do a little bit of that, but like there are certain elements to it where like you're seeing a bit more of a mature Riggs, but still kind of a little bit of the old Riggs. And like their relationship I think is so important and so powerful and so fun that like I don't care that I can't always remember that this movie is about the death of the Hunsackers and like the heroin trade and all that stuff. It's truly about these 2 guys who you are rooting for and like are hoping that they find what they need.
Let's talk about a couple other things before we wrap it up. I know we're a little scattered. I don't care.
The fact that we haven't been more scattered.
You mentioned that when Dixie's house explodes. That was a really funny scene too.
It was.
Because
those kids.
The kids completely steal the show in that scene. And when they're like, oh, gonna bust Dixie, they're gonna bust Dixie. And then they walk over there, the house explodes. We flash forward 20 minutes or however long when the fire department's there. And the Murtaugh talking to the kids. Hey, little buddy, how are you? What's your name? Don't tell him your name, Alfred.
Yeah.
Oh, I
wrote that down. Like that kid's like just a snitch. He's just gonna grow into a snitch. They do have a line in it that I think is like incredibly like relevant now, where they're like,
yes,
yeah.
We brought that up when we were talking about it because he says, and we'll just say it. Yeah. He says, I don't want to talk to the cops because my mom says the cops only shoot black people. And
like, wow,
my wife and I looked at each other and went, whoa.
Yeah, and like it's amazing to think like of all the things that ended up still being relevant to today, like mentality. It sucks that's like oh man, that still is something that people like that's a problem, and like in like these communities you're like, oh, that it's like these little kids have to be told that. It's like, oh,
and we don't have to assume that it's just a problem today. Like it was enough of
a problem then,
other than that it made it into the movie as kind of a joke line. And the fact that he's talking to a black police officer is another layer to the story.
There's whole like they accidentally like hit on a psychology there where it's like they didn't realize how relevant that you know that problem was going to be for communities for decades.
And there's no end in sight, unfortunately, for that, even with everything that we went through a couple of years ago.
I do also love the kids wearing 3D glasses though.
Yes. And the other kids, how old are you, Alfred? Don't tell him you're 6.
Great kid actors. Like it's so hard to
so much fun.
Their timing, their delivery, like it's so hard to find kid actors, I think, and like to see like such a good use of them.
And then there's the other thing I wanted to mention was how did Riggs get reassigned from drug bust to homicide, where they wind up it becomes a drug bust, but it's because of the shootout, right? And
nobody wants to work with him,
right? Because he's kind of lost his mind at that point. But that was another great scene when he's in the police station and Murtaugh sees him and has no idea who he is. Gun. One of the many where he says he's too old for this. That was the first one, I think.
I believe it is.
Actually, it's only twice in the movie. I was kind of expecting it to come back and hit that line one more time.
He implies it a few times.
But I mean, as far as rule of threes, like you get it that third time, you bring that recall, like we talk about in improv all the time. You want to maybe bring that recall back right at the very end. Oh, he said the thing again. And I was expecting that, and he didn't say it
I think
again.
he does like at the very end. Like I think there's an ADR line when he goes back out to fix the bulb.
Maybe he does. Maybe I just missed that then. Okay, well, if that's the case, then I just missed it.
Because I think they rule of three, both of them, because like that, they do the thing with him saying he's not crazy as they're walking into the house. And then like, You hear about the dog and Burbank the cat, which, by the way, is credited as Burbank the cat. So Burbank the cat played Burbank the cat. He goes back out
As
to fix a
himself.
bulb. Yes, as himself. I do like. I have a line, like I was just like as I was doing my notes, and like this is one of those movies where I was bigger on like focusing on notes at first, but then like one of those movies just sucks me in, so I'm just like watching. Yep. And at one point, one of my notes is just slow motion gunshots. Fuck yeah, because it's like when they turn and then like they just shoot at Mr. Joshua. I was like,
yes,
this is like so unnecessarily over the top. Like the whole fight scene with the two of them on like the rain-soaked front lawn.
I was not expecting a martial arts fight to end this movie.
Puts them in like a Kimura lock. And like,
that was another thing. I was, it's there's none of that. I mean, we know they're both special forces guys, and we've heard the Murdaugh say to Riggs earlier, none of this Tai Chi, just do it. Play it straight. So we've had that seed planted that he knows some sort of martial arts, and then we know that that Mr. Joshua's a special forces guy because the kids tell him he sees the tattoo, and so. But even so, I was not expecting basically a fist fight and a martial arts fight to end the movie as the major climactic scene.
Chekhov's Tai Chi or whatever. Like once they reference it, they have to do it. I also love something I miss about movies is like what is clearly a soundstage, like that neighborhood, like where the houses are.
Yes, I believe that was the Warner Brothers lot in Burbank that was recently torn down.
And like you can recognize it in a handful of movies.
Yes.
But there is something so oddly comforting about that, like, this is not a real neighborhood, and yet somehow it makes it better, because it's like this feels like there's something idyllic about it, and especially like for something like this that's like gets paired with being, tangentially a Christmas movie, like the motif of like a fake house with those like old school lights on it. It's like it just feels like a warm sweater.
Yes, it does. And that was the Warner Brothers Ranch. It was right in the middle of downtown Burbank. It's right across the street. Have you ever been to Burbank?
I have not.
It's right across the street from the Walt Disney Studios complex. And Warner Brothers just sold it, and they just tore it down this summer. It had so many iconic TV and movie home fronts. They were all fronts. I mean, they were all just facades. But that was where they shot the Friends fountain scene was there at on the Friends opening. One of my favorite shows of all time is Bewitched. I just love that show. That was where that house was, which that house was used in Christmas Vacation, and that was the house that Tim Taylor blew up in Home Improvement one time. And then so many things. They even shot WandaVision on that street recently. And they just demolished it about 2 or 3 months ago to build condos there in the middle of Burbank. But it was right in the middle of Burbank, which is pretty cool. I have a friend who he might wind up being on this podcast. He works for Marvel Studios as an IT professional. Very, very well-respected guy at Walt Disney. And I was out there a couple weeks before the pandemic, and he gave me a private tour of the Walt Disney Studios. We got to go up in the Marvel Studios office. He said, I can't take you further than this, but we're up in the Marvel Studios reception area, and they've got like the original Robert Downey Jr. Iron Man suit. And I'm thinking, that's probably the real one because it's not in a public area. Right. That's not the one that they're showing off at Disneyland, where everybody can pose for pictures. I'm like, that's probably the real
and probably especially built where like because he actually had to wear it for certain scenes.
It was pretty cool. It was pretty cool. So I told him, I'm like, next time I'm in LA, I need another one of those private tours.
If since he works for Marvel, I don't know if Dolph Lundgren's The Punisher came out in the late 80s or early 90s, but like. That might be a fun one.
Add that one to the list.
Because I was like, I'm trying to think of a Marvel movie that came out in the 80s, and like there's Howard the Duck.
This will be 2 episodes in a row that Howard the Duck is referenced because it's brought up in the Terminator episode.
Yes. Yes.
So yeah, and that's not on the list.
Howard the Duck's not?
I need to add Howard the Duck to the list.
I pity the person.
As a Back to the Future guy, I've always had a crush on Leah Thompson, so maybe I need to add.
Well, so does Howard the Duck, and it's weird.
Yeah, that's what I've understood. We need to wrap up, but you've got a ton of notes. Is there anything else you want to bring up? Because we can ramble. We're not beholden to time, but I know you said you had somewhere to be.
I honestly think we hit almost everything. I'm trying to think. I do find that the news station that Mr. Joshua KCOP. First off, I do love its K because like as somebody who works in journalism, one of my biggest pet peeves in movies is when a production does not do like there's a split, there's a divide in the country of what's a K and what's a W. And anytime like a West Coast has a W, drives me nuts. Like there are some K's on the East Coast. Like there's one in Pittsburgh,
and there's some W's in Texas.
Yeah,
but outside of that, it's W. West of the Mississippi is all K.
Right.
East of the Mississippi is all W.
And so like him being KCOP, I thought was just fun. Like
that was not the first time that was referenced in the movie.
Was it not? Oh, no. Maybe that is the when was the other reference?
Because Audrey stopped me when he said that. She said, "Oh, KCOP, K-Cop," and I said, "No. I noticed earlier in the movie that station is referenced. The scene where they jump off the building onto the crash pad, the KCOP news van is there.
Oh,
in the back, and I noticed that then because I'm also a broadcasting nerd, and I was always look for that. Like, how real did they get? Did they put an actual station? I'm thinking, there is no KCOP in Los Angeles.
No.
But I did think, okay, K-Cop, ha, ha, ha. And then when he says it on the phone, when Mr. Joshua calls the police department and says, whatever, KCOP News, I was like, okay, in that world, that's an actual station. So, and because it had been established in the background in an earlier scene. So, hey, I taught you something.
You
about
did.
This
I've
movie.
never, and I typically always notice like that's something I always notice is like when you see a news van,
mm-hmm.
like I always try to look at that and like see like if they're using real ones or if they're coming up with fake like call letters and like numbers and all that stuff.
I was just watching an episode of The Office this morning before we came in, and there was an episode where the NBC affiliate in Scranton is referenced on The Office, and that's the actual.
It is. It's the
NBC station there.
It's a sister station. I think it may not be anymore, but like I remember like having a boss that used to work out of Scranton, and he had mentioned like they would use them or like they referenced them or paired them with something, and I thought that was really cool that they used the Scranton NBC.
We're just being candid. We're using to record this the studios of where I work, WSM, the radio station in Nashville, and you remember the show Nashville that came out? There were all these fake radio stations that they would use whenever the Connie Britton character or the Hayden Panettiere character would go for an interview, except one. They would go to WSM, and our microphone would be used, our logo would be used, and I always thought that was cool. I didn't work here at the time. Then I come to find out that the company that owns WSM was a producer on the show, so that made sense.
Makes sense.
But then they would go to a station in Chattanooga, and this drives me crazy too. When there's an FM radio station that uses an even number after the point, 106.6, like, no, you've taken me out of it. You've lost me. We all know FM stations all end on an odd decimal.
Right.
Drives me crazy. But KCOP, not a real station, but in that world,
it's a great call letter. Like the
K-Cop.
When like that's always something I always find fascinating when you look at stations across the country of like what their call letters are, because it can make a station like more memorable or like easier to remember. Like I think Detroit has WXYZ.
Yeah.
We have like in Tennessee, like our Knoxville sister station, Wait. Like it's, you know, when you can actually say it as a word, like I always think it helps. There's
Wavy.
Yeah. There's Cake out in the heartlands.
Yep.
That's a super nerd thing, but I always love looking at that kind of stuff.
And that's going to bring us to the end because we've gotten way off topic, but that's totally fine. I don't care. No, you and I are becoming better friends.
We are.
Through this. And let's go ahead and put it on the books. We're going to do Lethal Weapon 2.
Awesome.
So I want to do this again with you, and I want to see that movie too because apparently it's just as good as the first one.
It's really fun. It's funnier too.
Is it really?
Yeah.
And my wife said she asked one of her friends at work, and they said, oh, the sequels get sillier. It becomes more comedic and less action.
It gets too silly at one point.
And that's what killed the series?
I think, like, yeah, it's just, like, literally by 4, they really are too old for this. But like,
when did 4 come out?
98.
Okay, yeah. So Murtaugh would be 60.
Yeah.
At least.
Yeah.
At that point, yeah.
That movie starts with them, like, having to, like, is like a weird pyrotechnic guy.
Yeah.
And it like leads to like Murtaugh being like stripped down to just like his comically his comical boxers that are like with like giant hearts and stuff on it. It's like, oh boy, this is where the series is going.
My last thing I always say is after I've talking with someone who loves this movie, clearly you love this movie,
it.
which I think is awesome. Has my mind been changed on the film? I don't think so, because I also really, really liked it. I don't have the nostalgia, the love for it that you do, because you've been watching it over and over for 35 years. I've seen it once 48 hours ago. But I really, really enjoyed this movie, and it made me want to see at least Lethal Weapon 2.
Yeah, so. I think you could stop at 2, and I think like this is one of those ones I end up watching it every year because the whole Christmas thing. And I think like because there's a lot of like movies there are a lot of action movies, like my RoboCop is one of my favorite movies, but I don't watch it every year because like I have to like have a reason to. Mm-hmm. So like this and Die Hard, and then back in like October, like Predator, like those are movies that end up being every year because I associate them with something. And Lethal Weapon is just, whether somebody wants to call it a Christmas movie or not, I think that's a subjective thing. I think we all can enjoy whatever we want to enjoy on the holidays. But like to me, it's like one of those things where every December I know I'm going to watch Lethal Weapon.
And they weren't thinking about that when they made these movies, that people are going to come back and watch them, because even in the 80s, home video was brand new at that point. And so it wasn't like somebody made this in mind going, this is going to become a Christmas classic. This is something people are going to watch every year. I don't think we got to that point until maybe Elf was made, that was a movie made to be watched repeat every year, and probably 2004. I can't think of any other even Christmas movies from
2003,
the 90s.
by the way, because this is the 20th anniversary.
Okay, so but into 2000, same.
Yeah. Well, I guess like because you had Grinch a couple years earlier, you had like
the Jim Carrey Grinch was 2000. Oh yeah, then that was definitely because by 1999, 2000, DVDs were brand new, and all of a sudden it's people they knew people were just gonna pop this in. If we
also
make this
have
once, we're going to sell it on DVD every year, over and over and over.
You also have the mid-90s classic, Jingle All the Way with Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Yeah, I remember that one.
Don't you dare say anything bad.
Oh, you're wearing...
I'm wearing it's Turbo Time shirt.
I've seen it once or twice. I do remember.
It's bad in the best way. I love that movie.
I know. I remember Phil Hartman's in that movie, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh my! Like
it was not long before he passed. Yeah.
About 2 years.
Yeah.
And like my wife loves there's a whole bit with him, like, because he's trying to get with Arnold's wife. That's the whole gist of his character. And like he's in their house, answers the phone when Arnold calls, and like he's eating like the cookies. It's like, oh, these cookies. And it's just like Arnold just yells at him. He's like, put the cookie down. Anytime we're watching, like my wife's like, shut up, everyone, shut up. It's a line. Put the cookie down.
Love it. Arnold Schwarzenegger, The Terminator. That's the next episode. Coming up January.
That's already been recorded.
It's already been recorded. We're going to put that out January 8th. Sorry for the delay if you were expecting The Terminator this week, if you're listening to them in order. So we'll talk more about that with my friend Keith. But Sebastian, thank you for coming in.
Yeah,
this has been so much fun. And let's do it again for the sequel.
Awesome.
Do you have anything you're working on outside that you want to plug while we're got an open microphone?
Just like you mentioned, we met through improv. At Third Coast, I would always love to give a shout out to Third Coast
Comedy Club.
My group, I don't want to like give specifics because who knows when someone listens to this, but like I am a part of a group called Madam Improv. We have a couple we have shows the next few months, like once a month at Third Coast with another group called Off Broadway. It's called Double Feature. Would love anybody around Nashville to come check us out. Obviously, just follow Madam Improv on Instagram, or also check us out. We do a monthly show at a brewery in West Nashville called Zons, giving them a shout out because they're great too. But you can catch us there once a month as well. And
that's kind of how you and I met, because I think I know everybody else in Madam Improv I've been in a class with at some point, except for you. And you're the one that wanted to do the podcast. So I was like, yeah, sure, let's do it. So that's how we got to know each other.
Yeah, if you're giving me an excuse to just talk about a movie forever, let's
do it. All right. Yeah, again, let's do the sequel.
Awesome.
Well, thanks again for coming in, man. I appreciate it. It was a ton of fun. That's going to be the last episode of Video Oblivious for 2023. I'm going to take Christmas Day and New Year's Day off. The next new episode will be out on Monday, January 8th. So you guys have a happy holiday season and a very happy new year. I'll see you back here again, January 8th, 2024. Well, that's going to do it for this episode of Video Oblivious. And stick around. Another new episode with a different movie is just a few days away. Thanks to my guests for being a part of the show. And if you'd like to be a part of the show, send me an email, zbennett@gmail.com. That's zbennett@gmail.com. Maybe there's a movie you love that I've never seen. Send me an email. We'll connect, and we might even talk about it here on the podcast. And don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, whatever your platform allows. Give us a good rating if you really enjoyed this podcast. And thanks again for listening to Video Oblivious.
I'm too old for this shit.